Today down in the comments, I don't want to hear about your favorite foreign language horror film, because I think I've asked that before. I want to hear about your favorite country that produces horror films. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-shirt, back after a somewhat lengthy hiatus, which I will explain in a minute. This is the channel where we talk about horror movies and then pair them with a piece of reading that you will enjoy if you like those movies. I'm the author of Clown in a Cornfield, the Bram Stoker winning young adult horror novel, slasher novel, teen slasher novel. And I've written a bunch of other books, novels, novellas, short stories, for all kinds of horror fans of all ages, even adults. The reason that I haven't uploaded the video in quite a while, it's been a few months, but if you don't follow me on Twitter or Instagram or maybe even Facebook, I don't even know if I posted on Facebook. It was just recently announced that there will be a sequel to Clown in a Cornfield. So if you haven't heard that, if you only know me from YouTube, there will be a sequel for Clown in the Cornfield. It's Clown in the Cornfield 2, Friendo Lives. It is coming out next year, summer 2022. But I had to write it. I had a deadline, and I had to finish that. And then I had a bunch of other stuff. I had the first horror convention I'd gone to and had been a guest at since we were all on lockdown and stuff like that. I was at Scares That Care in Virginia. So I've been busy. I've been a busy bee, but I've still been watching horror movies and I've still been reading horror books. And I really have been aching to get back to YouTube. And I've had several nice people reach out and be like, oh, why haven't you uploaded the video in a while? I miss you. I miss you too, and I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be talking about movies. And I really wanted this first video back to be a special video. I didn't want to just do oh, I saw a movie at a screening or whatever. I wanted this to feel special, so I looked at what I'd been watching while I hadn't been making videos, and I tried to figure out, oh, what's a top 5 list, or what's a bunch of movies I could talk about that are linked, that are thematically similar, or something like that, some kind of connection. And what I figured out is that I've done videos for Vinegar Syndrome. I've done several best of Vinegar Syndrome videos. I did a Severin one, I believe. I did an Arrow. I did several Arrow ones. I talk about these companies all the time. I talk about these people that put movies out on Blu-ray or on DVD. But I've never once talked about Mondo Macabro. If you aren't familiar, they're a label that's been going for a very long time. They're a label that, in fact, one of the movies I'm going to talk about, it's 2003 or 2004, the first DVD edition of it came out, and Mondo Macabro put it out. If you're even a casual collector of movies like this, you'll probably remember them because they had these, when they were doing DVDs, they had these red spines. And now the red spines are kind of a luxury item for the Blu-ray editions. They only do the limited editions that you can get buy direct from them in the red cases. The rest of them are in traditional retail Blu-ray cases. But I was watching a bunch of Mondo Macabro movies, and I thought this would be a good one. Let's talk about 5 Mondo Macabro movies. This isn't the top 5, this isn't the best 5. This is just 5 that are on Blu-ray. I wish I had more of my DVD collection to show you, but a lot of my DVDs are actually in storage. So the stuff that I bought in high school and maybe even the end of middle school, when I was first getting into international horror and foreign horror movies, a good portion of that collection and a good portion of the way I'd seen these movies was through Mondo Macabro and the early days of that label. And it was very weird to buy a movie like Satanico Pandemonium or Alucarda, going to a Best Buy and walking out with it. That's what the DVD market kind of allowed and what it was. I talk to people all the time, in-laws and stuff like that, and they're like, DVDs? You still buy DVDs? Don't you have Netflix or Blu-rays? What is that? Or 4K Ultra HD? They don't even know what that is. They've never even heard of that. They didn't know that such a thing exists. So as things get more niche and more boutique, it's really, really nice that a company like Mondo Macabro is still around and still putting out movies and still licensing movies and doing beautiful 4K scans of some of these movies. These discs we're going to talk about, for the most part, all look really great. And when they don't look great, there's disclaimers up front of that, oh, we can only get these elements and this is why it is. They are doing valuable work and they're keeping these movies around and they're keeping these movies alive because spoiler alert, Paul Naschy's The Devil Incarnate probably isn't coming to Netflix anytime soon, may not even be coming to Shudder. but they're doing great work to preserve these films and keep presenting these films in the nicest way possible. And yeah, I'm just a really big fan of this label. And we'll talk a little bit more about why when we talk about specific films. But I've rambled enough. Let's do it. Let's go through 5 Mondo Macabro Blu-ray releases that I've watched somewhat recently that I feel like I can recommend. All right, first one, I want to start strong. So we're going to talk about The Blood Spattered Bride. This is a Spanish horror film directed by a guy named Vicente Aranda. This is a movie that I feel like I was more familiar with the marketing materials for the movie than I actually was with the movie itself. There's a fairly famous double feature it was on with a fairly famous ad campaign. I can't even forget, or I'm forgetting the other movie it played with, but it was kind of a drive-in staple, the dubbed version of this, the American version of this. But it is a beautiful movie. It is a movie that, as with one of the other movies we're going to talk about here, I'm kind of very surprised I'd never seen before because it's incredibly, incredibly up my alley. This is a play on the Carmilla Sheridan Le Fanu novella vampire legend that a lot of vampire movies, especially when you get into the more erotic or lesbian vampire films, a lot of them either claim they're based on or actually are based on this book, this same source material. Daughters of Darkness, I think, is a play on Carmilla. Bunch of the not just one, but not just two, but a bunch of the Hammer movies, the Karstein movies, are based on Carmilla. And this Spanish entry is based on it. It is a young newlywed couple with very interesting power dynamics in their relationship. The man is older than the woman. Go to this guy's childhood castle, basically, and the young bride is basically kind of puzzling out weird things about his ancestry and vampiric things about his ancestry, and having this kind of awakening that relates to the power dynamic that is in their relationship. And it's a fascinating and very mature and very understated movie for a movie called The Blood Spattered Bride, with this cover and with this amount of bloodshed, which is beautiful and bright and colorful, and great locations. I love when a film like this. I love when a European horror film feels kind of like a tour of Europe, and this movie very much has that vibe to it, even though we're staying in roundabout the same areas. A beautiful, awesome movie. Great transfer, great looking movie. Great disc from Mondo Macabro. And another thing I'll mention about them just generally as a company, price point on these. They're frequently on, whether you buy direct from them, they're $20 flat. Whether you buy on Amazon or Diabolic DVD, you can get them as low as $15, $16. They're almost budget priced, but the quality that you get is exemplary. Next, we're going to talk about a movie, possibly my favorite movie of this whole video, but I'm not sure that it will be everyone's favorite, so I want to kind of couch it in the middle there, a sandwich. But Symptoms, this is by Jose Larraz. This is a Jose Larraz film who, at this point on the channel, we've basically talked about Larraz's nearly his entire filmography, between what Vinegar Syndrome's released and what Arrow Video's released, or basically his entire filmography that's available on US Blu-ray. But Symptoms is somewhat of an outlier. We talked in earlier videos before about how Larraz is a Spanish filmmaker, but he made a lot of his movies in the UK with UK crews, so they have this kind of British feel to them. They feel very British. Symptoms is kind of the biggest exemplar of that. It is a psychological drama about kind of a weird, kind of nerdy girl who is inviting her friend over to stay in her remote English countryside. And there's clear from the get-go that there's some kind of obsession thing, something she's hiding, something that's gone wrong at this place. And the whole movie, it's very subtle, and it's very slow burn, and it's got a lot of creep factor to it, and a lot of misdirects as to what exactly is going on and what's going wrong in this house. But it's it feels incredibly British. It's such a classy film compared to some of the movies we're going to talk about. This was actually Britain's official entry into the Cannes Film Festival, 1974, the year this was released. But if you like Larraz, if you like his kind of more salacious films like Vampires, which is one of my favorites, you will really, really like Symptoms. You just have to go in knowing that it's something different. I'm talking about how different it is and how slow. I'm trying to use euphemisms where some people might call this either boring, or there's some people will point up at the screen and be like, "That's not horror, it's only vaguely creepy." But that said, there is a jump scare in Symptoms. There's a one really uncanny, really weird sequence in Symptoms that scared the hell out of me. It's really, really incredibly effective. And films of the 60s and 70s kind of get a bad rap with, quote unquote kids these days, who are so stimulated by the way filmmaking has evolved and the way editing has evolved and the way just the culture in general has evolved. Don't have the patience, quote unquote, for it. But I defy you to sit through Symptoms and not feel something, and not feel some kind of scare, some kind of general unease, because it's a really beautiful, creepy movie. Next, we're leaving Europe behind, and we are going to Korea. This is a Korean horror film from the early 80s, directed by director named Go Young Nam. It is a movie I admittedly never heard of until Mondo Macabro released it, but if you listen to their back cover copy and their hype, this is one of the better known horror films. As Korea's kind of restrictive censorship practices, and as the codes were lightening up in Korea, they started making genre pictures, and they started making sexy pictures, and this is the movie that kind of sprung out of that newfound freedom. But Suddenly in the Dark was a fantastic surprise. Was a movie that, after all these dark castles and things set around the Plague era in Europe, it was nice to watch a film that was, set in the time that it was shot. It is early 80s Korea. We follow a family. We follow the husband, just came back from a trip where he's a fact-finding trip. He's a professor that studies butterflies. The wife is needing help around the house. She's been talking about, we had to let our last maid go. He comes back from one of these trips with a young girl. And it's this is your new help around the house. This is the new housemaid. Let's give her a chance. He has kind of convoluted and kind of vague explanation about where she came from. She has nothing but the clothes on her back and this little satchel that she's carrying around with her. And inside the satchel is this creepy doll that seems like it pretends bad things for this family, because the doll is a woman holding a big knife or an axe. Everything kind of unspools from there, where we have the wife is really nervous that the husband is cheating with this young woman he brought into the house, and all this different, funny to watch kind of 5 or 6 movies in a row and just see themes jump out, even though they are made on completely different continents, by completely different crews, by completely different people, but they're just put out by the same company. But Suddenly in the Dark, it's a kind of a paranoid thriller until it's not, until it kind of goes full tilt, destroying sets, chewing scenery, slash and kill kind of horror. It's really, really, really interesting and cool, and just something I wasn't expecting. But yeah, good on Mondo Macabro for bringing this out, for a piece of Korean cinema history I did not know about. It doesn't start and end with Park Chan-wook. Next, I want to talk about Satanico Pandemonium, a movie that's probably more famous as a title than it is as a movie, because Robert Rodriguez based a character from Dusk Till Dawn on it, but he really just took the name. It's a cool name, Satanico Pandemonium. Of the films, maybe besides Symptoms, this is kind of the most straightforward and artsy, and as salacious and crazy as the cover is, this is really on the softer edge of nunsploitation. When you think about nunsploitation, and when you think of the movies that are all antecedents of Ken Russell's The Devils, trying to cash in on nuns doing naughty things. Satanico Pandemonium is actually a pretty restrained one, and a pretty kind of downbeat and sad one, because it's pretty front with the fact that this nun we're following, this young nun. Oh, this is a Spanish film, by the way. Spanish film, 1975. This nun we're following, it's pretty clear that even though she's like making a deal with Satan and she's letting the devil in, maybe it's up for interpretation, but it feels pretty clear to me that she is just mentally ill. And this is kind of her downward slide as she commits to sinful acts that are harmful to herself, harmful to other people around, harmful to the people around her, harmful to the convent, maybe even murderous. And then maybe she's not murdering because maybe she's just imagining things, maybe she's mentally ill. Really, really, really weird, uncomfortable picture that will keep you on your toes, and maybe not the one to watch when you're in a bluer mood, because it is kind of a bummer. But that said, it is the most colorful and beautiful movie that we're going to talk about. This is there's this certain look to this movie, a certain kind of technicolor. All the nun habits, they're in these blue habits, these blue uniforms, blue nun uniforms. That's what you call them, right? Habits. But it is a very visually striking picture. It looks like a Powell and Pressburger movie. It looks like The Red Shoes or Black Narcissus. It has that kind of look to it. It doesn't have that budget to it, but it has that beautiful technicolor, pastoral look to it, while all these horrible things are happening, and while it's dealing with questions of abuse in religion and racism and all this different stuff, and poverty and mental illness, but really sunny, nice looking movie. One of the ones that this is a rewatch. This is I remember having the DVD of this 2005 maybe, so it was still in high school. And at that point, I was getting everything that Mondo Macabro was putting out. And they're putting things out like Mystics of Bali and Lady Terminator, which are just these gonzo crazy movies that I couldn't get enough of. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to pick up every one of these movies with a red spine. And then I got to Satanico Pandemonium, and it was a movie that in high school I don't think I was ready for. I don't think I really liked that much. But as an adult, damn, great movie. And then the last movie I want to talk about, but not really the last movie I watched. I did watch The Devil Incarnate. But as I was shooting this video, or as I was assembling this video, I was like, oh, I actually brought 6 discs out. I'm not going to talk about 6 movies because 5 seems like enough. But at a certain point, this is a teaser. At a certain point, I'm going to do a rundown of the films of Paul Naschy, and I'll talk about this one briefly because Naschy considers it pretty important, but not officially talking about that one, but it is good. And if you like Paul Naschy, check that one out. But last movie, I wanted to end super strong. I wanted to end with the biggest surprise, my favorite thing I probably watched over this last few weeks. Assuredly my favorite thing I watched over the last few weeks. Blood Ceremony. This was released in the US under a number of different titles, including The Female Butcher, which is a really cool poster, really exploitive poster. But this is another Spanish horror film, and actually a Spanish-Italian co-production. This is by Jorge Grau, where if you recognize the name Jorge Grau, you probably recognize him from his other film that has a bunch of different alternate titles. The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, also known as Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. But he's a fantastic director, not overly prolific. But this movie is absolute beast. It is exactly 90 minutes in its longer international cut. Absolutely incredible. It's another one that's based on a legend that a lot of horror movies and a lot of gothic horror movies and a lot of horror movies in castles typically get based on. It is based on the Elizabeth Bathory myth, legend, hearsay. What's interesting about Blood Ceremony is it uses the Bathory myth, and it kind of like assumes you know who Elizabeth Bathory was, because we're following one of her descendants. It's like, oh yeah, you know there was another Elizabeth Bathory before you, right? So that's where the twist comes from. And the rest of the movie, there's so many different subplots going on, and there's so much ground covered. It's almost this like meditation on superstition, and not only superstition kind of in the time in like the Central Europe, around the time of the plague, world of the film, but like in superstition in general, because it's constantly playing with like the idea that it's like, are you watching a vampire movie? Are you watching a movie with like ghosts and witches and blood sacrifices and stuff like that? Or are you just watching rich people who are gonna screw everything up for the peasants around them, and then they're gonna pay the price for it? Like, are you watching, which movie are you watching? And it's a great version of that kind of gothic atmosphere, because it's almost like it's also almost like revisionist gothic, where it's like, no, there's not a vampire, and there's not people raising from the dead, and there's not witches, and there's not love potions, but people will screw everything up just as badly, and things will get just as bloody just on their own. But an absolutely gorgeous and haunting movie that is absolutely never boring, that absolutely moves at a mile a minute. One of the threads beyond the Bathory thread is there is suspected vampirism in the town, and the town has called in these doctors, and they've called in these priests, and they're forming an inquest, and the doctor is kind of standing there like, isn't this is just a sham? Like, there is no such thing as vampires. They're like putting basically a dead body on trial as if that guy in the casket was a vampire, and they have to figure out what to do with him. But then that links into the main story later. There's a serial killer subplot. It is bonkers and great and beautiful and bloody, and a little hard to take at moments, because this is kind of before they had the ASPCA being like, no animals were harmed in the making of this film. A couple animals were harmed in the making of this film, so you may want to cover your eyes for those very brief moments. But that said, there's something like that in Blood Spattered Bride too, so just to give you the heads up that if it seems like an animal's about to get hurt, it actually is, so don't watch. But fantastic film. Really beautiful cinematography, really beautiful set design, really just the transfer on this 4K transfer that Mondo Macabro did. This sucker pops. It's when you see blood in this movie, you really see blood. I loved it. This is my favorite thing that I watched in prep for this video. But I'll put the links down in the description to our friends at Diabolic DVD, to Amazon, to where you can buy these movies if you want to check them out. Yeah, fantastic. This week's book recommendation, I had talked about this a little while ago on Instagram, because Joshua Hull, the author, actually, someone I've been following for a while, and I wanted to talk about this book. It's different than the books we usually talk about. So most times we talk about fiction, most times we talk about horror fiction. This is kind of a nonfiction book. It's kind of almost a coffee table book too, but it is called Underexposed, the 50 Greatest Movies Never Made. And it's basically, if you remember the early days of the internet and the early days of like entertainment magazines, and you're like, oh, this movie's gonna come out, Gladiator 2, the one that Nick Cave wrote. You ever hear about that one? So they basically, Hull talks about the project, talks about the movie, talks about how far it got into production, and then why it was canceled. And then they do, there's different artists for each of the movies, and they do a different poster. Nightmare on Elm Street, the Dream Lover. Of all these movies that like tantalizingly almost got made, would have been really cool if they got made. I think George Miller's Justice League's in here. Yeah, there it is. Justice League Immortal. It's just a great idea for a book, because I feel like a lot of this stuff gets lost to the ravages of time, especially in the pre-internet age. There was Hitchcock's Kaleidoscope, the unmade Alfred Hitchcock movie. Clockwork Orange starring the Rolling Stones. It's just really fascinating, and it's one of those kinds of books you could either read all in a row, or you can read like a coffee table book, and just pick and choose what seems interesting to you. Robert Rodriguez's Barbarella, I remember that one. When that was going to star Rose McGowan, I remember that movie. But yeah, a really interesting look at how hard it is to make a movie, and how movies constantly are falling apart, even when it seems like, oh, that's a slam dunk, that movie should have gotten made, that movie would have been great. Here's a bunch that didn't. I really like this book. It's handsome hardcover, really quality printing. This is the kind of thing that like you could get for someone, your buddy who likes movies, or your family member that likes movies. I bet they'll kind of like this. This is a good kind of gift book. All right, nothing else to really talk about. If you like this video, please hit like, please subscribe. Please go follow me on Twitter, Facebook. I even made a TikTok. Jesus, oh my God, I made a TikTok. Yeah, that's it. Please buy a book. Please leave a review if you liked Clown in the Cornfield, and if you're excited for book 2, please go buy a copy for a friend. Leave a review on Amazon. It really helps me out. Yeah, that's it, and I will see you next week. It won't be that long, believe me. I'll see you next week.